Hello folks and welcome to this week's review. Now, back in October of 2023, last year, as I'm making this video, I reviewed an isolation platform from IsoSlice, produced by recording engineer and musician Paul Mallion. This is basically a one-man company based in the UK. This platform was and is designed to hold a turntable. Its job is to remove vibration from the turntable itself and thus ultimately to lower the noise floor from the final hi-fi sound output, thus improving the sound. Now, I liked that platform a lot. It gave it an award-winning rating and fireworks and all-night parties followed, as you might expect. Well, now IsoSlice is back with another product. This time, well, something that looks very much like that turntable platform, but not. This one is called the Block. It's smaller than the turntable platform at 230mm by 180 by 65mm. It is priced at £285 the pair. The pair? Oh yes, because the blocks are designed to sit underneath your speakers. And I'm sure you can see the family resemblance here. Now, the Block features 9 layers of mechanical isolation between your speakers and the surface they are supported by. Specifically, we are talking about a combination of MDF, poplar plywood, and acoustic foam. This is what I'm talking about. As you can see, multiple layers and smallish footprint. I'll bring this to camera so you can have a good look. And that's basically it in terms of tech talk. They're pretty simple and straightforward, really. And what I'm more interested in is this. I know this technology works underneath a turntable. Question is, does it work underneath a pair of speakers? Well, let's find out in the sound quality tests. Welcome to the sound quality tests for the IsoSlice The Block isolation platforms, speaker platforms, I suppose you would say. Now, for this sound test section, I wanted to do 2 distinct, very different tests. Firstly, I wanted to test the blocks directly underneath a pair of speakers, and I decided to do this in an AV setup, a very basic AV setup that I have in my office, not my living room, but we'll get to that. I also wanted to test the blocks positioned underneath a pair of speaker stands to see if they work in that manner. So I then shifted the blocks to my very audiophile listening room for that test. You know what? Let's do the hi-fi test first, shall we? So for this one, I grabbed a pair of Martin Logan 15i speakers, placed those on top of a pair of hi-fi racks stands with no feet added to the stands, tried those as is, then placed the stands on top of the blocks. Now, I began with CD and Yes guitarist Steve Howe and his first archive collection, Homebrew 1, and the track The Valley of Rock. Now, inserting the blocks underneath my speaker stands changed the positioning of the speakers fundamentally in that, well, they were raised off the floor, nearer to my ear level, which in itself was a good thing. And you might be saying to yourself, but look, you could have used bricks or wooden blocks, just basic bits of wood, to do the same thing. In fact, I did just that. I happen to have some wooden blocks and I pushed those underneath the stands themselves, and for the blocks, those basic wooden blocks, yes, there was an enhancement because the tweeters of the speakers I was listening to, the Martin Logans, were nearer to my ear level, a bit more detail, not much else. Then I inserted the IsoSlice, the blocks, under the stands, and that did change the sound for the better and noticeably, adding a heap of air and space right across the soundstage, which allowed more detail to pass through to the ear. The entire band of mid-range now sounded far more interesting, delicate and informative, while treble had an airy, fragile quality. Bass had extra punch as well, and it was better focused. I then removed the IsoSlice blocks from underneath my stands and swapped them over for the Sound Deck Mark II Mini discs, because that's basically what they are. That's the shape of them. They are little isolation feet, and I put those underneath the stands themselves just to see how they compare to the IsoSlice blocks. Now, to date, I have rated the Mark II Minis as my best performing speaker stand isolation feet set in this price area, so it's worth a quick comparison. Now, they are cheaper than the blocks, so you've got to take that into consideration. Now, the Mark II Minis use something called constrained damping as a means of lowering the noise floor, and they did just that. I would say that the lower frequencies were superior to the IsoSlice blocks. The Mark II Minis reduced the noise and added a deep bass character and a deep bass strength. The IsoSlice blocks did add bass punch and character, but far more air around the bass, as well as mid-range and extra detail. The Mark II Minis were a little drier, a little less space. So lots of punch, lots of impact, but not the same amount of air that the IsoSlice blocks added. So, for a laugh, I added the Sound Deck Mark II Mini discs underneath the IsoSlice blocks, just to see if the combo worked, whether they would complement each other. And to do so, I also turned to vinyl and Coldplay and the album Viva la Vida. The result? Well, not bad, but the combo does horrible things to the stereo image, creating a bit of a muddy mush in the center of the stereo image, which kind of wandered around with no fixed point. So I tried something else. I put the Mark II Minis on top of the IsoSlice blocks. So you kind of had a bit of a sonic sandwich. You had the speakers, then the stands underneath, and then the Mark II Minis underneath that, and then the blocks from IsoSlice. And again, they were nice, but I felt you still lost a little bit of air and space, and that's really the highlight of the IsoSlice blocks. So my recommendation, well, the Mark II Minis are cheaper, and they have that stronger yet rather drier bass, very detailed, maybe slightly less mid-range detail and space than the IsoSlice blocks. The IsoSlice blocks had a more spacious and detailed mid-range and treble, maybe slightly less impactful in the bass, you might say. So swings and roundabouts. Overall, though, I thought there was more going on with the IsoSlice blocks. Again, no real surprise. They are more expensive, rather more complex, rather more involved, and the sound quality kind of reflects that. So in terms of hi-fi, I felt the blocks were a winner. I then moved location from my listening room to my office, and I placed the blocks on my IKEA Kallax shelving system, and I put a pair of Spendor S3 5R speakers on top of them, directly on top of them, to see if the sound improved in this basic, very basic AV configuration. To repeat, although featuring quality components, this still remains a ragtag AV setup with no real audiophile pretension in terms of shelving or setup or positioning. I had a basic Kallax IKEA shelving unit. I grabbed any spare hi-fi kit I could find, I threw them together, and I switched on. And the equipment was basically shoved against a wall, not getting in the way, was the priority of this AV system not particularly sound. It was more functional, you might say. So you could say the system kind of struggles a bit where sound is concerned. So with the blocks in place underneath my Spendor speakers, I tried a kind of real-world experiment, and I loaded up YouTube, and I played some basic music through YouTube, through the speakers with the blocks underneath. In fact, I played some Eddie Grant and Electric Avenue. Whatever happened to Eddie Grant? Where did he go? Now, to compare, I originally had my Spendor S3 5R speakers sitting on a set of very basic black Sorbothane fruit pastels, you might say. So I swapped them out and I inserted the IsoSlice blocks underneath my Spendors, and I was thankful for their low footprint, the rather neat and compact build, especially the front to back nature of the design, which followed the deep nature of the speaker cabinet itself, because, well, I didn't have a great deal of spare space available, so everything fitted rather nicely. As for the sound, wonderful. It added life to this track, inserting desperately needed air and space into the vocal and the backing music. Before, well, the entire track earlier sounded muffled, dull, lacking in clarity, as if it had been smothered with a velvet blanket. Now, well, it wasn't perfect. This is basic YouTube we're talking about here. But blimey, there was so much more extra space around the mids and the bass, and the whole thing had extra focus, and the stereo image was now locked dead center with the backing vocals planted there as well, instead of wandering around like a cloud in the background. It sounded very nice indeed. I then tried my Sony Blu-ray player and I inserted that Steve Howe CD in there and I played that. And once more, the air and space around the mids brought the entire track to life. It gave us extra zing, extra pep. But it also had a huge amount of detail, which was now visible to the ear. A tambourine on the right channel seemed to appear out of nowhere. It was pretty much invisible before. The lead guitar, well, Steve Howe's lead guitar, and he plays a very complex guitar, now sounded far more complex, far more layered than before. The extra focus better arranged the stereo image, while bass had good character instead of the earlier muddy boom. So even here, in this so-so cobbled together AV system, the IsoSlice blocks made my entire AV system come alive and made me want to listen to the music itself instead of just treating the music as secondhand background wallpaper noise. And that, folks, is the basic review of the IsoSlice The Blocks isolation platforms for your speakers. Let me round up the whole thing. Let me give you some final thoughts. I'll do some pros and cons, and then I'll give it a rating. The blocks are a great implementation of the original IsoSlice turntable platform. The blocks are also a superb addition to your HiFi or your second system that you might have in a spare room or a garage, or even as your AV system, whether that be a pro setup or the kind of messy system I was running. In fact, especially the ragtag system I was running, because my AV system was not built for sonic splendor. It was built to do a job. It did the job well, but it didn't sound amazing. The blocks tied everything together in a bow and made it sonically pretty. For the first time, it sounded like an office entertainment system that I wanted to actually listen to. And that leads me to those of you who might be running a HiFi system with no formal HiFi shelving unit. Maybe your HiFi is shoved onto any available space you can find. Let's say a coffee table, maybe those IKEA bookshelves, some other bookshelves. Anywhere you've got a bit of space. These blocks are made for this kind of setup. Or that arrangement in particular, these blocks will provide a sense of quality to your hi-fi sound setup. In sonic terms, at least, the blocks will provide you with some freedom in how you set up your hi-fi, therefore. Thus, whether you use the blocks in AV or as part of a main or second hi-fi system, be prepared for a sonic boost and fun times ahead. So, more fireworks and late night parties for IsoSlice, methinks. Pros and cons. And in the good section, we have space, we have air. Allied and connected to that, the treble also benefits. Rather fragile, rather delicate, rather nice. The small footprint. Well, if you can insert a pair of speakers into a space, you can include these blocks along with them because they don't stick out. They fit in nicely. So, where the speaker fits, so do these blocks. Focus on the bass. It helped a lot and it added impact. And an overall detailed performance. I heard more of that coming through. Far more detail arrived at my ears. In the bad section, well, if I was being overly picky, maybe a lack of bass impact, perhaps. But again, that's really because there's lots of air and space in the lower frequencies as well. So it depends how you see it, really. And that in no way detracts from the rating, and it's going to be an award-winning rating. I love these things to bits. I'm going to give them an 8 and a groovy congratulations to IsoSlice. And that's it, folks. Thank you very much for staying to the end of this video. If I can ask you down below, if you can click on the like and subscribe buttons, it will help this channel enormously. Also further down, I will give you links to IsoSlice in the UK. You can contact them for all of your needs. Well, buying these blocks anyway. And in addition, further down still, there are links to my Patreon page where you can see the exclusive video, hi-fi news, etc. every single week. There's one this week. And also links to my website and my Facebook group, which you're welcome to join. And that's it. Phew. I will see you hopefully, well, I'll see you first next Friday for a music alerts video. And then on the following weekend, we will have another review. Take care of yourself, folks. I will see you very soon. Until then, bye-bye for now.